This is my true story. My son was everything to me. I raised him alone after his mother passed, gave him everything I could, and believed no matter how bad life got, he'd always stand by me. But I was wrong. One summer afternoon, he told me he wanted to take a drive together, just father and son, like old times. I didn't know that trip would change everything. Hours later, I was alone on the side of a highway with an envelope on the seat beside me. Inside it were words that broke my heart. Before I tell you, comment where you're watching from and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. It started like any normal afternoon. The sun was high, the highway was quiet, and my son said he wanted to take me for a drive. He told me he missed our old trips, the ones we used to take when he was a kid, when we'd stop for burgers and talk about everything. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. We'd been distant for a while, ever since he'd started struggling with work and money. So when he showed up that morning, smiling for the first time in months, I thought maybe this was his way of trying again. We left the house just after noon. He drove, I sat in the passenger seat, and the old radio played soft country music. The air smelled like summer heat and dust. He didn't talk much, but that wasn't unusual. Sometimes he went quiet when something was on his mind. I asked where we were going and he said, "Just out for a drive." I didn't think twice. It felt nice, just being there with him again, the way it used to be. We passed familiar roads at first, the small diner, the church with the broken sign, the gas station where I used to buy him candy when he was little. But then the scenery changed. The fields got wider, the traffic thinned out, and the signs started showing towns I hadn't been to in years. I noticed the way his hands gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles pale. His jaw was tense, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He wasn't just driving, he was running from something. I tried to ask if everything was all right, but he only nodded. I didn't push. Parents learn to pick their moments. Still, something in my chest felt heavy. The farther we drove, the quieter it got. Even the music stopped when he turned off the radio halfway through a song. The only sound left was the tires humming against the asphalt and the wind pressing against the truck windows. We stopped once for gas near Tulsa. He filled up without saying much. I bought 2 coffees and handed him one, but he didn't drink it. He just stared out at the horizon like he was trying to memorize it. There was something final about the way he looked at the sky, like a man saying goodbye. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking, that maybe he was just tired or distracted. But my gut said otherwise. When we got back on the road, he started taking turns I didn't recognize. We were somewhere outside the city now. Long stretches of open highway, no houses, no cars, just farmland and silence. I asked if he knew where he was going. He said yes, but his voice cracked just a little when he said it. I looked at him then, really looked, and realized how thin he'd gotten. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face looked older than it should have. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to scare him off. Didn't want to break whatever fragile moment this was. I told myself maybe he just wanted to talk. Maybe he was finally ready to open up about the money problems, the calls from people asking for him, the nights he didn't come home. I didn't know this wasn't a drive to talk. It was a drive to leave. As the miles passed, I noticed he kept checking the mirrors, glancing back every few minutes. I asked if someone was following us. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the road. That silence said more than any explanation ever could. By the time we passed the old abandoned gas station near the county line, I realized we were miles from anywhere. I checked my phone. No signal. I turned to ask what was going on, but before I could speak, he slowed the truck. The engine hummed low, then stopped completely. He pulled onto the shoulder of the highway, dust rising around us. He turned to me for a moment. Not angry, not scared, just sad. The kind of sadness that doesn't need words. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a white envelope, and placed it gently on the seat between us. I looked down at my name written in his shaky handwriting. When I looked back up, his hand was already on the door handle. That was the last time I saw him behind the wheel. The truck came to a full stop on the side of Highway 75. The air outside shimmered from the heat, and all I could hear was the sound of engines roaring past every few minutes. He told me to stay in the truck, said he'd be right back. I thought maybe he needed to stretch his legs or make a call. I didn't question it. He stepped out, closed the door gently, and walked toward the old gas station up ahead, the one that had been shut down for years. I watched him from the side mirror. He didn't look back. He just kept walking until the sunlight swallowed him up. At first, I didn't think much of it. I waited, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. But the longer I sat there, the stranger it felt. He'd left the engine running, the air conditioner still humming softly. His coffee sat untouched in the cup holder. I remember looking at it, noticing how it was still warm, how he hadn't even taken a sip. I rolled down the window to see if I could spot him, but there was nothing. Just the empty road stretching in both directions and the faint whistle of the wind cutting through the fields. I called out his name once, then twice, but the sound got lost in the distance. The longer I waited, the heavier my chest felt. Something wasn't right. I stepped out of the truck and shaded my eyes from the glare. The gas station looked deserted, its windows boarded, the sign half fallen, weeds growing through the concrete. There was no movement, no sign of him anywhere. Just silence. That's when I noticed it. The envelope on the seat. White, folded clean, with my name written in shaky handwriting. Dad. The word looked strange, almost like he had written it in a hurry. I froze. My first thought was that maybe it was something simple. A note, a small surprise. Maybe something he wanted me to read before we talked. But something about the way it was placed, right there in the middle of the seat, facing me, made my stomach twist. I opened the door and sat back down. The sun was glaring through the windshield, turning everything too bright to see clearly. I picked up the envelope. It was thin, but slightly heavy, like there was more than just a letter inside. I turned it over. No return address, no markings, just sealed tight. My fingers hesitated on the flap. I didn't want to open it. My gut was already telling me whatever was inside would change everything. I waited a few more minutes, hoping he'd come running back to the truck, maybe smiling, maybe saying it was some kind of misunderstanding. But the road stayed empty. Not a single car stopped. Not a single sound came from the old station. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. I was completely alone. The heat inside the truck was starting to rise. I shut off the engine and leaned back, holding the envelope in my hands. My mind went in circles, trying to figure out what had just happened. I thought about how quiet he'd been lately, how distant, how he avoided eye contact whenever I brought up bills or work. I thought about the way he hugged me last week, tighter than usual, longer than normal. At the time, I thought it meant he was getting better. Now I realized it might have been a goodbye. After what felt like an hour, I finally opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was the handwriting. His handwriting. Messy, rushed, uneven. The first line made my throat close. "Forgive me, Dad." My hands started to shake. I could barely read the rest at first, the letters blurring together as my heart pounded. I don't remember breathing much in those moments. The cars passing by sounded far away, like a different world. The seat beside me felt cold, even though the sun was burning through the glass. I just sat there, staring at the words I could barely process. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that it was a joke or something else entirely. But deep down, I already knew. That envelope wasn't a message. It was a goodbye. And the highway, with its endless stretch of empty road, was the only witness to the moment my son decided to disappear from my life. The envelope trembled in my hands as I pulled out the folded paper inside. My name was written at the top again, and below it, 3 words that stopped my breath cold. "Forgive me, Dad." My vision blurred for a moment. I blinked hard, trying to focus on the writing. The words were uneven, smudged in places, like they'd been written in a rush, or maybe with tears on the page. I could still smell the faint scent of engine oil on the paper. His hands always smelled like that. He'd written it recently, maybe even that morning. The letter wasn't long, but every line hit like a blow. He said he was sorry for everything. Sorry for the lies, the fights, the years he'd wasted trying to prove he didn't need help. He said he'd made too many mistakes, that he'd gone too far into something he couldn't get out of. I read those words over and over. I messed up, Dad. I can't fix it this time. My chest tightened. I wanted to shout, to scream, to tell him he didn't have to run, but he wasn't there to hear me. He wrote about the people he'd been dealing with, the wrong people. He said it started small, loans, favors, a few bad bets. Then it grew into something bigger. He owed money to men who didn't forgive easily. He'd tried to keep it from me, tried to protect me, but now it had gone too far. He said he'd sold everything he had, his truck, his tools, even the old watch his mother gave him. He wanted to make things right, but he couldn't see a way out. Then, in the middle of the letter, I saw a folded slip of paper taped inside. A bank receipt. I pulled it out carefully. It was a deposit receipt. $42,300. The account name at the top was mine. My hands froze. I didn't understand at first. He'd transferred what was left of his money, all of it, into my account. I stared at the date. It had been done that morning, before the drive. He'd planned it. This wasn't something that happened in a moment of panic. He'd prepared for it. I went back to the letter. He wrote, "I wanted to leave you something, Dad. Not because money can fix what I broke, but because I don't want you to feel like I left you with nothing." My throat burned. The words started to blur again. He told me he'd thought about coming clean, about going to the police, but said the people after him wouldn't stop there. He said they'd come for him, and maybe for anyone connected to him. "You'll be safer if I'm gone," he wrote. Every line after that felt heavier. He told me not to blame myself, that none of it was my fault, that I'd done everything a father could do. He said I was the only good thing in his life that ever stayed constant. The last line was short. "If you ever forgive me, know that I tried to make it right in the only way I could." I sat there in the truck for a long time, reading the letter again and again until the sun started to set. The traffic had thinned out, the sound of cars fading into the distance. I looked at the empty road where he'd disappeared, half expecting to see him walking back. But the horizon stayed still. I wanted to believe he was alive somewhere, that maybe he just needed to run for a while. But deep down, I knew the truth. The kind of letter that starts with "forgive me" doesn't end with coming home. The paper in my hands felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. Every word was a piece of him, a mixture of guilt and love, written by a man who'd lost everything, but still thought about his father in the end. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. The air was still, but the silence felt deafening. I wanted to call the police, call someone, but all I could do was sit there and stare at that small envelope with my name on it. It was the last thing he ever gave me, and the only thing I didn't know how to let go of. I kept reading the same lines over and over again, as if maybe the words would change if I looked at them long enough. They didn't. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. He wrote like a man who'd already made peace with something I couldn't yet face. He said he had gotten in too deep, gambling, debts, people who didn't forgive. He said he tried to fix it, but every time he did, it only got worse. He talked about losing his apartment, selling his car, and working odd jobs just to stay ahead. He said every step he took to dig himself out only buried him further. He didn't make excuses. That's what broke me the most. There was no blame, no anger, just confession. He wrote that he was tired of hiding, tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. He said he knew I saw it in his face, the worry, the fear, the way he avoided my eyes every time he came over. He said he didn't want me to see what he'd become, a man who couldn't even save himself. But then came the line that hit harder than all the rest. "You gave me everything, Dad, and I still threw it all away." I couldn't breathe for a moment after that. My eyes stung, and my chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to tell him it wasn't true, that no father expects perfection, that I would have helped him if he'd just told me. But the letter wasn't asking for advice, it was goodbye. Halfway through the page, the handwriting started to wobble, like his hand had been shaking. He said he had made one last decision, to sell everything he owned and transfer what was left to me. The receipt was proof. He wrote that he didn't want me to struggle in my old age, that he wanted to make sure I'd have something even if he couldn't be around. "It's not much," he wrote, "but it's all I have left. I hope it helps you more than it ever helped me." There was another line below that, one that made my throat tighten so hard I could barely swallow. "I know I wasn't a good son, but I still want to be remembered as yours." That was the moment I broke. I pressed the paper to my chest and just sat there in that silent truck, the highway stretching out ahead like a road to nowhere. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about a man who thought disappearing was the only way to save his father from pain. That's what tore me apart. The thought that he believed leaving was an act of love. I unfolded the letter again, searching for something more, some hint about where he was going, but there was nothing. Just that same phrase near the bottom. "Don't look for me. Just remember me." He had planned it all. The drive, the stop, the envelope, even the timing. He wanted me to find the letter only after he was gone far enough not to be found. I sat there for hours. The sun dropped lower, the sky turning orange, then red, then dark. The air grew cooler, but I couldn't move. Every few minutes a truck would pass, the wind shaking the side mirrors, but I barely noticed. I kept thinking about when he was a kid, how he used to run around barefoot in the yard, how he'd shout for me to watch him jump into the creek, how proud I'd felt the day he graduated high school. It was all there in flashes, moments I didn't realize were already fading away. Then I looked back at that last line again. "I know you'll forgive me, Dad. You always did." It was true. I had forgiven him 1,000 times. For the broken things, the lies, the late calls, the debt collectors, the worry. But this time, I didn't know how. Because forgiveness only matters when the person you're forgiving is still there to hear it. I folded the letter one last time and placed it carefully back in the envelope. The wind had started to blow harder outside, dust swirling across the highway. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't even know where to go. All I knew was that somewhere out there, my son was either running from danger or from himself. And either way, he was gone. I sat there inside that truck, holding the letter like it was alive. The wind outside made the door rattle, and every passing truck sent a shiver through the metal. I didn't know what to do. My son had just vanished, and the only thing he left behind was that note and a receipt that didn't make sense anymore. The silence was the worst part. No voice, no footsteps, no sound except the steady hum of the engine that I hadn't turned off yet. I looked at the empty seat beside me, half expecting him to come walking back any second, saying it was all just a mistake. But no one came. The longer I waited, the more real it became. I turned off the engine and stepped outside. The sun was high now, the heat pressing down like a weight. My shirt stuck to my back and sweat ran into my eyes. But I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the road. Miles of asphalt stretching into the distance with no sign of him. Cars passed now and then, their drivers glancing for a moment before speeding up again. No one stopped. No one asked if I was okay. Maybe they saw an old man standing by a truck and assumed I didn't need help. I looked down at the letter again, reading the first words over and over. "Forgive me, Dad." I'd seen a lot of things in my life, but nothing prepared me for this kind of pain. It wasn't sharp or sudden. It was heavy, slow, and endless. It sank into my chest like a stone and stayed there. I wanted to scream his name into the wind, but my voice wouldn't come out. My hands were trembling too hard to even hold the paper steady. I sat back inside the truck and tried to think. Should I call the police? Should I drive toward town? Should I wait? Every idea felt useless. He could have gone anywhere. I checked my phone. No signal. I tried turning on the radio, hoping for noise, but even that came through static. It felt like the world had gone quiet on purpose. The air inside the truck grew hotter. I opened the window halfway, but the air that came in felt dry and stale. My throat hurt, and my heart wouldn't slow down. I thought about all the things I never said, how proud I was of him, how much I loved him no matter what. I thought about how he used to call me old man and laugh when I tried to fix his car. All those moments came rushing back like a movie I couldn't stop watching. The letter was still in my lap, creased now from my shaking hands. I read the last few lines again. He had written, "I know you'll hate me at first, but maybe one day you'll understand." I didn't hate him. I couldn't. I just didn't understand why he thought leaving me like that was the right thing to do. He could have told me anything, even the worst truth, and I would have helped him. That's what fathers do. The noise of the highway faded as I sat there longer. A bird landed on the hood, pecked once, then flew away. The gas station sign creaked in the distance, half bent from rust. Everything felt still, like the world had paused for just me. My stomach ached, but I couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't move. I kept thinking maybe this was all some strange dream. Maybe I'd wake up and see him knocking on the window with that grin he used to wear. But the empty road said otherwise. After a long while, I noticed the gas gauge, nearly empty. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I turned the key, but the truck coughed before starting. The sound snapped me out of whatever daze I'd been in. I realized how dangerous it was sitting alone on the highway like that. Still, I didn't drive right away. I looked at the seat again, at the envelope, now faintly wrinkled and spotted from my sweat. I placed it gently in the glove box and closed it slowly. Then I whispered to the empty seat beside me, even though no one could hear, "I'll find you, son." Then I pulled back onto the road. The sun was starting to dip, the sky glowing orange. Every mile I drove away from that spot felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. The silence in the truck was deafening. The world kept moving, but mine had stopped. And somewhere out there, my son was alone. Maybe alive, maybe not. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. That night, I drove straight to the nearest town, a small place called Henrietta. The lights looked blurry through my windshield, partly from the dust, partly from my tears. I parked outside the sheriff's office and sat there for a few minutes before I could even open the door. My legs felt weak, and my hands were still trembling from the hours on the road. When I finally went inside, the room smelled like coffee and paper. A young deputy looked up from his desk, surprised to see an old man standing there at nearly midnight. I told him my son was missing. He asked when I'd last seen him, and when I said, "About 8 hours ago," he sighed. He said adults have the right to disappear if they want to. I placed the letter on the desk and told him to read it. He read it slowly, and I saw his face change. His tone softened. He said they'd file a missing person report and start looking. They took down his name, age, and last known address. They asked if I had a recent photo. I pulled one from my wallet. It was from his 30th birthday, the one where he pretended not to want a cake. He was smiling wide, arm around me, holding up a bottle of beer. The deputy nodded and made a copy. He said they'd alert nearby counties, bus stations, motels, anywhere he might show up. But even he didn't sound convinced. I went back to my truck and just sat there. The parking lot was quiet, except for the hum of a streetlight above me. I stared at the sheriff's door for a while, hoping someone would come running out saying they found him already. No one did. I spent the night in that truck, my back aching, my mind racing. Every noise made me sit up, thinking maybe it was him walking by. It never was. The next morning, I drove up and down Highway 75, stopping at every gas station, diner, and rest stop I could find. I showed his picture to cashiers, truckers, anyone who'd look. Most shook their heads, said they hadn't seen him. A few said they might have, but none of their stories matched. One woman at a diner said she thought she'd seen someone like him buying coffee the day before, alone, looking tired. That small detail gave me hope, even if it might not have been true. I called hospitals across Oklahoma and Kansas. Each time the phone rang, I prayed and dreaded the answer at the same time. None had him listed. I even called the bank, thinking maybe he'd left a clue with that transfer. The clerk confirmed the deposit. It was real, and it had come from his personal account. But after that, the account was closed. Empty. Gone. The sheriff called me 2 days later to say they'd checked surveillance footage from nearby highways and stations. His truck was caught on camera near Tulsa around 5 p.m. the day he left me. After that, nothing. No transactions, no sightings, no trace. It was like he vanished between 1 mile marker and the next. The deputy said it was possible he'd changed his name, taken cash, and moved on. People do it more often than we think, he said. But not my son, not the boy who used to laugh in the backyard and fix cars on weekends. After a week, I went home. The house felt wrong without him. His old room still smelled faintly of motor oil and soap. His jacket hung by the door. I sat on his bed and stared at the dent in the mattress from where he used to sleep as a kid. It felt like sitting beside a ghost that hadn't died yet. Days turned into weeks. I kept in touch with the sheriff's office, but they stopped calling back after a while. The case stayed open, but there was nothing new to report. I checked my mailbox every morning, hoping for a letter or a sign, anything. But all I got were bills and silence. I started to drive that same highway every Sunday, stopping at the same spot where he left me. I'd sit there for hours, staring down the road, waiting for a truck to appear. Sometimes I'd imagine hearing his voice. Other times I'd see a shadow in the distance that looked like him. But it was always just another traveler passing by. I began to realize that the road wasn't going to give him back. No one was. Still, I couldn't stop searching. A father never stops looking, even when there's nothing left to find. The days that followed felt like one long stretch of the same hour. Morning and night blended together. I would wake up not because I slept, but because my eyes couldn't stay closed anymore. Every time I blinked, I saw him standing beside the truck again saying, "I'll be right back," even though those were the last words I'd ever hear from him. The house was quiet, too quiet. I turned on the TV sometimes just to fill the silence, but I never listened. The sound didn't reach me. All I could hear was that sentence from the letter. "Forgive me, Dad." I stopped cooking. Food didn't taste like anything. The neighbors came by, asking if everything was okay because they saw the sheriff's car in my driveway the night I got home. I said it was family business, and they nodded like they understood. But no one did. Every night, I'd sit by the window waiting for headlights that never appeared. I left the porch light on, just in case he found his way back in the dark. I told myself that if he ever came home, I wouldn't be angry. I'd just open the door and hug him. But days passed, and the light burned for no one. I went through his things, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. His tools were still in the garage, lined up like he'd just used them. His jacket was hanging by the back door, dusty but still holding his smell. Motor oil and cigarettes. I found an old box under his bed filled with letters, most unopened. Bills, overdue notices, threats from lenders, things he never told me about. The dates went back years. He'd been drowning quietly while pretending to be fine. That realization hit harder than the letter itself. He'd carried all that weight alone, probably to protect me, and in the end, it destroyed him. I called every friend he ever had, people from his old jobs, his high school buddies, even his ex-girlfriend from years ago. Some said they hadn't heard from him in months. One said he'd been borrowing money. Another said he'd been talking about leaving the state for a fresh start. Every answer made him sound farther away, like he was already gone. The police told me they'd keep the report active, but after a week, I could tell he was just another name in a file. I started driving again, not because I had somewhere to go, but because sitting still felt worse. I'd drive out on Highway 75, pull over near the same spot he left me, and sit there. Sometimes I'd read the letter again, tracing his handwriting with my thumb. Sometimes I'd just stare at the horizon until my eyes burned. I'd imagine him walking toward me, tired but alive, saying it was all a mistake. Then I'd snap out of it and realize the only sound was the wind through the grass. I didn't tell anyone what the letter said. It felt private. Something between father and son that no one else could understand. The sheriff called again, asked if I wanted to speak to a counselor, but I said no. Talking wouldn't change anything. I didn't need therapy. I needed my son. The nights got colder as the season changed. I'd make coffee and sit outside wrapped in my old coat, looking up at the stars, wondering if he was seeing the same sky somewhere. Maybe he was alive, maybe not. The not knowing was worse than any answer. One morning, I checked the bank account he'd mentioned. The transfer had cleared. It wasn't much, just over $9,000. It felt wrong to touch it. I left it there. That money wasn't meant for spending. It was a message. He'd wanted me to have something so I wouldn't feel like he'd taken everything with him. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. I realized then that the money wasn't what he was giving me. What he'd really left was the truth, that he was lost long before that highway day. Each day since, I've learned how to live with silence. I wake up, make coffee, water the small garden he helped plant years ago, and try to believe that maybe one day I'll get a call or a letter that says he's alive. Until then, I just keep waiting. I don't know if I'm waiting for him or for peace. Maybe both. Some mornings I wake up believing he's alive. I tell myself he's out there somewhere, maybe in another town, doing small jobs, trying to start over. I picture him walking into a diner, ordering black coffee, keeping his head low, waiting for time to fix what guilt broke. It's how I survive the days, by pretending he's still breathing under the same sun. But by night, that hope fades. The silence of the house reminds me that if he was alive, he would have called. If he could, he would have come home. The heart plays both sides, believing and grieving at the same time. I've spent hours staring at the same photo on my desk, him at 17, holding up his first paycheck, grinning from ear to ear. He said he was going to buy me something nice with it. He came home that day with 2 burgers and a pair of socks. I laughed back then, but now that memory feels like a knife. How does a boy with that smile grow into a man who leaves his father on a highway? I keep asking myself where I went wrong. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I didn't push enough. Maybe he thought I'd be better off without him. Every question leads nowhere, just circles back to pain. The sheriff called once more, months later. He said there had been a report of a man matching my son's description seen in southern Texas. Thin, quiet, working odd jobs. But when I asked for proof, he said it wasn't certain. That word, certain, I've come to hate it. It means they don't know anything, and neither do I. Still, for the next week, I drove south, searching faces at truck stops, construction sites, and shelters. I asked around, showed his photo, and every time someone said, "I think I saw him," I felt that same small spark. Then it would die out when the details didn't fit. Sometimes late at night, I replay that drive in my head, the one where he left me. I wonder if he cried while he wrote that letter. I wonder if he looked back at me in the rearview mirror. I wonder if he meant to disappear or if something happened after he drove away. The questions never stop. They eat away at the quiet. I can't even drive past an empty highway without feeling my chest tighten. The sound of passing trucks makes me flinch. It's strange how a road can turn into a wound. Friends tell me to move on. They say it's been too long, that I should accept whatever happened. But how do you accept something when you don't know the ending? Death gives you closure. Disappearance gives you torture. I've seen parents bury their children. It's terrible, but at least they have a place to visit. I have nothing. Just a letter, a bank transfer, and an empty driveway. I sometimes sit in church, even though I'm not much of a praying man. I don't ask for miracles. I just sit there, letting the quiet hold me for a while. Sometimes I leave a folded note in the donation box. Not a prayer, just his name written on it. Maybe God knows what to do with it. I sure don't. The hardest part is the in-between. Every phone call makes me jump. Every knock on the door freezes my heart. I've imagined the moment he comes back hundreds of times. I see him standing there, thinner, older, but alive. I imagine him saying he's sorry, and I imagine myself saying it's okay. But that's the thing about imagination. It always fades when you open your eyes. The porch stays empty. The phone stays silent. Hope keeps me breathing, but doubt keeps me awake. Some nights I convince myself he's gone for good. Other nights, I hear something outside, a car door, a faint voice, and I rush to the window like a fool. Nothing's there, just the wind or a stray cat. I still look though. I'll always look. Because even if I never see him again, Part of me believes he's walking somewhere under the same sky, looking for forgiveness he already has. The house hasn't felt like a home since that day. It's too big for one person now. Every room carries a memory that refuses to fade. His jacket still hangs by the back door, right where he left it. I can't bring myself to move it. The coffee mug he always used sits on the kitchen shelf, a thin crack down one side. I wash it every few weeks, even though no one's touched it in months. It's strange how we hold on to small things just to feel close to people who aren't here. I keep the letter in my nightstand drawer, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve to protect it. The edges are soft now, worn from how often I take it out. Sometimes I read it once a day, sometimes 10 times. Every word feels heavier than the last. I still remember how his handwriting looked, hurried, uneven, but strong. It's the kind of handwriting you recognize in a heartbeat, even after years apart. I trace the words, "Forgive me, Dad," with my thumb every time. They hit me harder the longer I live with them. His room upstairs hasn't changed. I dust it once a month and open the window to let air in. His old guitar still leans against the wall, missing 2 strings. His bed is made, his sneakers tucked under it like he'll need them again someday. The smell of old cologne still lingers faintly, mixed with dust and time. I've thought about boxing his things up, but every time I try, I freeze. Packing them away feels like saying he's not coming back, and I can't do that, not yet. The nights are the worst. The house creaks when the wind hits, and for a moment I think I hear his footsteps. I know it's just the air moving through the vents, but I still look down the hallway anyway. I keep expecting to see him leaning on the doorframe, smiling, like when he was little and couldn't sleep. The silence afterward hurts the most. It's the kind of silence that feels like it's listening to you. I end up turning on the radio, keeping the volume low, just to hear another voice. I stopped locking the front door months ago. Part of me thinks that if he ever finds his way back, I want him to walk straight in without hesitation. I even keep the porch light on, though the bulb keeps burning out from overuse. The neighbors probably think I'm forgetful, but it's not that. It's hope. Hope disguised as a lamp. Every night before bed, I look out the window to make sure it's still shining. Sometimes I find myself talking to him, not loud, just in a quiet mumble while I'm doing chores. I tell him what I fixed around the house, or what the weather's been like. I tell him the tomatoes in the garden didn't grow well this year. I don't expect an answer, but saying those things makes it feel like he's still part of my life somehow. Like the world hasn't taken him completely. A few months ago, I found a voicemail on my phone I'd forgotten about. It was from him, weeks before he disappeared. He said he was sorry for missing dinner and that he'd make it up to me next week. I replayed it so many times that I memorized every breath, every pause. Then one day, the phone updated, and the message disappeared. I sat there for hours, staring at the blank screen, trying to remember the exact sound of his voice. It's fading now, little by little, and that scares me more than anything. I still go out every morning to get the mail, hoping for something with his handwriting. A card, a note, anything. But the mailbox stays empty, just bills, advertisements, and silence. It's been long enough that people have stopped asking about him. The sheriff doesn't call. The neighbors don't mention it. Life has moved on, for everyone but me. I'm still in that same moment on the highway, still holding that same letter, still waiting for a knock that may never come. The house feels heavier every year, but I can't leave it. This was his home. It's the only place where his shadow still lives. Some nights, when the wind blows through the trees, it almost sounds like the hum of his truck pulling into the driveway. I sit up in bed, listening, hoping. Then I remember the truth. He's still out there, somewhere. Or maybe he's gone forever. But either way, I'll keep the light on for him. Because that's what fathers do. It's been years now, but I still remember every second of that day on the highway. The smell of hot asphalt, the sound of trucks passing by, the sight of that envelope sitting on the seat beside me. Some memories fade with time. That one doesn't. It's stuck to me like a scar that won't heal. I've learned that when someone you love disappears, time doesn't move forward. It just loops around the same pain, over and over, until you forget what peace feels like. People tell me I should move on. They say maybe he's gone and I need to accept it. But they don't understand. You can't move on from your own blood. You don't stop being a father just because your son is missing. I still set a plate for him every Thanksgiving, still keep his birthday marked on the calendar. It's not because I can't let go. It's because I don't want to erase him. As long as I keep him in the small moments, he's not completely gone. Sometimes I think about what must have been going through his mind when he wrote that letter. Maybe he thought he was saving me from something. Maybe he thought disappearing was the only way to stop the trouble he was in. The words, "Forgive me, Dad," weren't an apology. They were a goodbye. And I didn't understand that until much later. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was giving up. And that's what hurts the most. That he didn't believe he could be saved. I've kept every part of him that I could. The photos, the jacket, the bank receipt, even the broken guitar. Each one feels like proof that he existed, that he was real. But none of it replaces his voice. That's what I miss the most. Not the words, just the sound of him saying, "Dad." I used to think the house was too quiet because he wasn't here. Now I think it's quiet because I've stopped talking. Silence becomes a habit when you've got no one left to listen. There are moments when I feel him near, when I'm out on the porch watching the wind move through the trees, or when I drive past the old gas station where he left me. Sometimes I catch myself talking to him without realizing it. I tell him what I fixed around the house or what I cooked that day. I tell him I forgive him, even if he never hears it. Forgiveness doesn't bring him back, but it keeps me human. It stops the anger from turning into something worse. I still visit that same highway once a year, the same spot where it all happened. I park the truck, step out, and stand by the road. I look down that long stretch of pavement and wonder how far he drove before he disappeared. I don't cry anymore. The tears ran out long ago. Now I just feel tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of not knowing. But I keep going back. It's my way of staying connected. That road took my son, but it also gave me the last piece of him I'll ever have. Life goes on, they say. Maybe it does, but not for everyone. Some of us stay frozen in a single moment, trying to make sense of something senseless. Every time I pass a father and son working together, laughing together, I look away. It hurts too much. They remind me of who we were, and who we could have been. I used to imagine a future where he had a family, kids of his own, a better life than I ever did. Now all I imagine is that he's safe somewhere, even if I never see him again. I don't know if he's alive or dead. I've stopped asking the sheriff. I've stopped searching online. I just wake up, drink my coffee, and whisper his name once before the day starts. It's the only prayer I know how to say anymore. Sometimes I think maybe that's what being a parent really means. Carrying hope even when there's no reason left to. My son left me on that Oklahoma highway with nothing but a letter and a promise I never understood. I don't care about the money he left behind. I don't care about the questions that will never be answered. I just want one more moment to see him, to tell him that he didn't need to disappear to earn forgiveness. He already had it. Maybe one day I'll find out what really happened. Maybe I won't. But until that day, I'll keep the porch light on, the door unlocked, and his name alive in this house. Because a father's love doesn't end on the highway. It waits for the road to bring his child home.